I'm Fredrik Viljesjö, and I'm partner here at We Are Movement. Tonight we have the pleasure to welcome again a return of Marc Rix from Scaled Agile.
Thank you, Fredrik. And hello, everybody. It is great to be back. I'm here talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is DevOps, and another one of my favorite subjects, which is architecture, and another favorite subject, SAFe. So I'm definitely in the right place. I'm in my element. It's early in the morning. I've got my cup of coffee and a smile on my face. So I'm ready to go. Let's talk about DevOps and architecture in SAFe 5. This is me for anybody who doesn't know me. I'm a SAFe fellow and a principal consultant at Scaled Agile. I'm a member of the framework team. So, we write the articles and we manage the content on scaledagileframework.com. And then a lot of times from that content, assets and products and courses and toolkits are spun. So I'm on that team. Very, very exciting team, very intense team. We do a lot of writing, we do a lot of speaking, and don't get a whole lot of sleep. So this is what I want to cover today in about 45 minutes. Let's talk about what SAFe 5.1 is. What is this thing called SAFe 5.1? I'm going to just cover that briefly because there's some things that you should know about what we're calling this new set of IP. And then go into what's new in DevOps. I know we're all probably wondering what the details behind the DevOps part of this new release are. So I'm going to cover that. I'll also talk about some other cool updates that are relevant to engineers and architects and DevOps professionals. So some other things that might not be so obvious, but things that you might find interesting about the new release as well. And then I'll talk about new things in the pipeline. So a little bit of what we've done and where we're going. Let's start with what is SAFe 5.1. Well, first of all, I'm going to say that SAFe 5.1 is not a thing. We have the 5.1 label on some things and not others. We don't have the 5.1 label on SAFe. So if we look at the evolution of SAFe, we've seen that we've come a long way, right? We started with 1.0 and 2.0, and it was pretty simple and easy back then. And then we advanced through the years, but then things start to get a little bit funny with SAFe 4.0. We had a 4.0 release, and we have 4.5 and a 4.6. So we started to introduce that point release concept in SAFe 4. And now here we are in SAFe 5, and we issued a pretty significant update to SAFe 5. And a lot of folks are calling it SAFe 5.1, a point release to SAFe, but we're not calling it SAFe 5.1. That is because we're trying to simplify things, and we're moving away from the idea, at least temporarily. We don't know how long this is going to last, but at least for right now, we think it's a better idea to just call it SAFe 5 for lean enterprises. That should keep things easy. So when we talk about SAFe, we talk about the knowledge base, the set of articles, and the set of content and advanced topics and glossary entries that are in the knowledge base at scaledagileframework.com. We don't want to complicate things by putting point releases on it. And every time we put a release label on SAFe framework itself, the market tends to have an adverse reaction to that, because SPCs suddenly start to wonder whether they need to get recertified, do they need to get re-enabled in training, and our customers wonder whether they need to be doing things differently, bringing in new courseware, all of that stuff. So the dots complicate things. So we're going to simplify things and just call this SAFe 5 for lean enterprises. But what we're going to do behind the scenes is we're going to make incremental updates to that knowledge base so that we keep pace with the market and the latest thinking, and bring you guys the value you need in a timely way. So what we've done here is we're just calling it SAFe 5 for lean enterprises, but we have revved the big picture. So notice down there in the lower right-hand corner, we have put a 5.1 label on the big picture. So really, when we're talking about 5.1, it's the big picture that has changed. So this is a big picture 5.1, but it supports the SAFe 5 knowledge base. Okay, so going forward, we'll probably expect to see potentially new versions of the big picture and some of the article content behind it. So we might see a safe big picture 5.1, big picture 5.2, big picture 5.3, maybe expect that, but don't expect the safe label to change. It's going to continue to be safe 5 for lean enterprises until it flips to 6. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about DevOps. What's going on with DevOps in this new release? So speaking of big picture changes, these big DevOps changes shine through on the big picture. And over on the right, we have the previous version, the 5.0 version of the BP up there at the top of the screen, and the newer version 5.1 down at the bottom. And those gold rectangles indicate the places where we've done work on DevOps. So we've touched the continuous delivery pipeline. We've touched release on demand. We've touched those release boxes that indicate when we release. And we've touched the infinity loops that kind of wind their way around that agile release train. And we also touched that icon over there on the right that used to be the Calmer icon. It had a DevOps label on it, but if you remember back to 5.0, it was the 5 Calmer balls. We've changed that icon to look and feel a little bit differently, and it has some different behavior. So I'm going to go through these changes one by one. Let's start with the continuous delivery pipeline, because with DevOps, it all starts here, right? We do DevOps so that we can enable continuous delivery. It's really DevOps is really the set of practices and tooling. It's the technical practices, it's the engineering, it's the technical stuff that allows us to achieve continuous delivery through that pipeline, right? So DevOps in SAFe has always enabled that value stream from end to end, which helps us build that continuous delivery pipeline through continuous exploration, continuous integration, continuous deployment, so that we can release on demand. So we made a couple of things more obvious in this continuous delivery pipeline graphic. The first of which is those infinity loops. We played with this a little bit, and we track our thinking to the industry, and we've noticed how those infinity loops have become very iconic in the DevOps industry. Every time we see those infinity loops, we think DevOps. Well, we have the triple infinity loops, and so we wanted to make that a little bit more obvious. Tie it back to the DevOps industry as a whole, as sort of a tribute to the great thinking that's happening in the DevOps industry and the DevSecOps industry, and the fact that we stay plugged into all of that knowledge, and that we bring those practices in, and we shine those practices through the framework. So we wanted to acknowledge those triple infinity loops, and also, add a third loop just because we can. So those triple infinity loops are there. We wanted to make them more obvious. And we also played with release on demand. So in the previous graphic, release on demand was stuck over there on the right toward the end of that continuous delivery pipeline. And that was causing a little bit of confusion in the market and with some customers, and in some areas. And the thinking there was, if we have a release box, a single release box over here with release on demand on it, it may mean that we're doing all of this work and we're releasing one time. And we needed to get away from that perception, because even though it's a subtle perception in the framework that some folks have, it was causing some negative press and was causing some people to wonder if SAFe was really just waterfall in disguise. Are we doing all this work so that we can just have a big bang monolithic release at the end? So we really needed to adjust that picture so it's very obvious that we're releasing on demand, and we can release on demand at any time through that continuous delivery pipeline. We also touched the insides of this part of the graphic. And when we talk about continuous delivery, we really are talking about continuous delivery, right? Like in SAFe, we mean it. We mean continuous, just like anybody else doing DevOps anywhere else in the world really means continuous. So we really wanted that, that sentiment to shine through. So what we did about that was we wanted to show that we're doing continuous exploration, integration, and continuous delivery. We're invoking the entire continuous delivery pipeline within an iteration. It's not something we do across a PI. It's not something we do across a set of months, but we're doing this in rapid succession, and we're fitting all of this work within a single iteration. At least we're striving to. We want to be that quick about how we deliver those solutions. And it's not just one iteration, it's all of them, right? So you want to be doing this continuous, a true continuous delivery in each iteration throughout the entire PI. Now, notice we left those IP iterations alone because we like to do that. We'd like to reserve those for innovation and planning. So we didn't put the infinity loops inside the IP iterations. We hold those pretty sacred, and we want you to too. So when it comes to thinking about this as a technical practitioner or an architect, here's some opportunities for you to think about how to get involved in this, in enabling continuous delivery. One might be with system demos, right? If we're doing system demos on a regular basis, which you should be, all arts should be holding system demos at least every iteration or at least every 2 weeks or so, showing the demonstrated, the completed integrated work among all of the teams. A lot of times that requires some architecture help, right? Do we have the systems to support that? Do we have the pipeline and the tool chain technology to integrate the work together and showcase it in a staging environment or in some kind of an environment that closely mimics production, so that we can have those high quality system demos on a regular basis? And are we planning for those system demos, right? An iteration or two in advance? Are we thinking about which features or which enabler features or enabler capabilities we need to have in place so that we can host those system demos? A lot of times it's architects that play a crucial role in making sure that those system demos happen. Also, we've got enablers all over the backlogs and all over SAFe. And this is really the territory of architects. So if you're an architect and you're thinking about how you can contribute to SAFe in a 5.1 setting, really think about how you can enable those enablers. Are you writing enablers? Are you sponsoring them? Are you being a steward for those enablers? Are you making sure that they are delivered? And are they in the backlog? Are they defined well? Do people understand them? And are they being delivered alongside those business features? Very, very important there. And that brings us to architectural runway. Of course, architectural runway is always in motion. It's we're always having to lay down new architectural runway. And these are the things, it's the working systems, it's the infrastructure that enables those release trains to deliver on demand. So as architects, think about where you can play in this part of the SAFe system to enable continuous delivery. Lots of opportunities in there. So let's talk about DevSecOps for a second. A big focus of ours during 2020 was to focus on the security aspects of DevSecOps. We got beaten up a little bit in various parts of the market from our lack of security content. So we had some in there, but we really didn't do it justice. And when we looked at it, we knew that there were areas for improvement in there in the security realm. So it was time to attack that and build more security security guidance into DevSecOps. So let's start here. Let's start with the big picture and move into that new icon. So we replace that calmer icon with this new icon that puts security right in the middle. Now, notice a couple of things about this icon. Security is in there, but we're not calling it DevSecOps. And this is for a reason. We played around with that. We had a lot of conversations, both internally and externally, with customers, with partners, with trainers, and people even outside the SAFe community about what DevSecOps really means. We were very tempted to relabel DevOps, DevSecOps in the framework. But the more we talked about it, the more we experimented with it, the more we realized that security should just be baked in, just like quality is baked in. We do DevOps with security in mind. We DevOps with architecture in mind. We do DevOps with product management in mind and with compliance and infrastructure in mind. So it didn't really make sense to put sec in the middle of DevSecOps and relabel it, because that would kind of, that it would take away some of the importance of the other areas too. So what we decided to do was just leave it at DevOps. We're going to call it DevOps, and we're going to assume that we're just building security in along with everything else. But we are going to give security an honorable mention very front and center on the big picture. And we're going to show that security and security concepts and security policies, security practices, and security tooling is very, very core to the mindset of DevOps in SAFe. That's why we put it in the middle of the graphic, but separated it from DevOps. So hopefully that conveys everything we need it to convey about our approach to DevSecOps. It's very, very important, but it doesn't drive the thinking. It's not all we need to think about. Okay, so we have that new icon on the big picture. Let's talk about some of the elements here. We talked about that, security. Got to have security front and center. And this was something that was missing from the framework. We had security content in the framework, and we even have it in the DevOps courseware. We have an advanced topic or two article on the framework that addressed security. It just wasn't obvious. So here we're really making security more obvious, a more obvious part of DevOps. And we're not losing sight of Calmer here either. So we still have the 5 Calmer balls in the graphic. They're not as explicit as they were before, but they're definitely in there, and they're definitely in there toward the middle. So that Calmer mindset is still very, very important to DevOps. And then around the outside, we just have this stylized version of the continuous delivery pipeline. If you're familiar with the DevOps Health Radar, you'll probably recognize this iconography. We have that circle, we have the 4 aspects. So the green and the blue rings along the outside represent that continuous delivery pipeline looped into a continuous learning loop. So there's a lot of meaning behind this graphic, and we spent a lot of time experimenting with it and getting it right. So we hope it's got the same meaning for you that it does for us. We're very proud of this little guy. But then what does it do? So we know that everything on the big picture is clickable. And when you click on things, magic happens. So what kind of magic happens when you click on the DevSecOps icon? Well, before, when we click on the DevOps icon, it opened the Calmer page. And that's where we went through the mindset and the thinking behind DevOps for sort of the philosophy and not only the automation aspects, but the cultural aspects and the measurement and the lean flow aspects, et cetera, right? Well, we retooled that so that now the DevOps icon opens up a brand new landing page that introduces this view. Now, I know this is a lot, but this represents our commitment to thinking a lot more deeply about DevOps and SAFe, much more about the implementation aspects of DevOps than just value stream mapping and thinking about Calmer and the principles. So we started to do a very, very deep dive into the technical aspects of DevOps. And since there's so much there to talk about, right, there are hundreds and hundreds of tools and hundreds of practices. We can talk about behavior-driven design and test-driven design and security as code, architecture as code, immutable infrastructure, chaos engineering, site reliability engineering. There's so much there to talk about that we needed a way to organize all of that thinking so that when we do start to write in depth about it, we have an organizing framework that makes it make sense. So we have this new graphic that we call our DevOps keystone graphic. We're kind of still looking for a catchy name for it. But right now we just call it our big keystone graphic for DevOps. And there's a lot in there. And I'll talk more about how that works in a second. But just know that that's representative of a new DevOps landing page that's clickable from the big picture that opens up a 3-article series. The first article is the landing page itself. This is where we get an overview of DevOps. We actually talk about DevSecOps as well. We talk about the reason we're not calling it DevSecOps in the framework, but we do give honorable mention to the security community and recognize their contributions to DevOps. And we make the point that it's really these DevOps practices and tools that enable the continuous delivery pipeline. Very, very important, because over the years, we've gotten a lot of questions about how we actually enable that continuous delivery pipeline. What does that look like in real life? And what are the practices we need to have? What are the skill sets we need to have in which places in order to build and deliver and maintain that continuous delivery pipeline? So here we're making that connection right there on that landing page. The second article goes straight to Calmer. So we did not want to lose sight of Calmer as a core philosophy driving the continuous delivery and DevOps mindset throughout that pipeline. So this was the former DevOps landing page, but now it's been just moved over one article to the right. It's still very close to the surface and clickable from a few places within that landing page. And we're still driving home the idea that this is the core mindset and the values that everybody need to have throughout the value stream in order to make DevOps and continuous delivery a reality. So still very, very important there. And the third article is where we start to introduce a lot of this new intellectual property, this new thinking around practice domains. How do we even begin to think about these technical practices, and how do we begin to organize them in a way that makes sense? So this is where we're starting to delve into new practices, new insights, new guidance, technical practices and tools. And this is a lot of what the DevOps community and the technical practitioners in the SAFE community have been asking us to get into for a couple of years now. So now we're starting to broach that subject, getting into those areas, using this keystone graphic as not only a guide, but a table of contents and an organizing framework for all of that content. So that's the 3-article series that's launched from the landing page. Let me talk a little bit about that keystone graphic itself and how it evolved, because I think it's an interesting story. And if you understand the story, then it might be easier to parse that graphic. So when we set out to create a graphic that represented our thinking around DevSecOps, that incorporated the philosophy and the continuous delivery mindset and the technical practices and tools all in one, we went back to basics. So we started with the idea of the continuous delivery pipeline because we couldn't lose sight of that. At the end of the day, we needed to make sure that whatever we said about DevOps implementation and DevOps technical practices and tools tied back to enabling continuous delivery through that value stream. So this was our starting point. Then immediately we went to the DevOps Health Radar, because this is a view of that continuous delivery pipeline, right? If we look at the outer ring there, we have the continuous delivery pipeline represented. So we have continuous exploration, integration, continuous deployment, and release on demand. These are elements of that continuous delivery pipeline. They're just wrapped into a circle. And we like that circular view because it reminds us that what we're going for is a continuous learning loop. The continuous delivery pipeline is an always on process. It's not linear. It's not even necessarily sequential, but it is always on. It's a perpetual motion engine. We're always doing exploration. We're always integrating. We're always deploying, and we're always releasing when we need to release. So it's more of a loop. It's more of a cycle than it is a linear process. So we really wanted that to be in the key graphic. So we played with that. We stylized the outer part of the pipeline. We just changed some of the colors a little bit around those 2 outer rings. We like to play with stylings, and we have a lot of really talented graphic artists here at Scaled Agile. So we had a lot of fun experimenting with how we could change the look and feel of that outer ring. And we did that. And one thing that we learned through our conversations about this with our customers was that the customer was missing from that picture. So we had to include the customer. So one big innovation we made just with this outer ring was to include the customer there at the top. This reminds us that the continuous delivery pipeline and the value stream and DevOps and continuous delivery always start with the customer and always end with the customer. That's where the loop begins and ends. We're doing this for the business. We're doing this to deliver value. We can't lose sight of that as we delve deep into the technology. So the customer has to be there and is always front and center. And I think it's very profound that we have one role in this graphic and one role only, and that is the customer. So really elevates the importance of the customer in all of our DevOps thinking and reminds us that we need to be thinking about the customer and the business value of what we're doing at every point and every layer through DevOps implementation. So that's the outer ring. And then we replaced the inner rings with these practice domains. This is the organizing framework. So we have the DevOps health radar, and that's good for assessments and tracking your maturity levels from baseline to target and over time. So this graphic isn't meant to be a assessment tool. So we didn't want the spider chart there in the middle. We still have the DevOps health radar. This view doesn't replace the DevOps health radar. It's still in the framework. You can still access that from the metrics page and still run your assessments. That's all great and still very relevant. It's just a graphic with a different purpose. So here we wanted to move these practice domains into the middle to show that these practices support and enable continuous delivery through that pipeline. So the big question is probably, all right, what are those practice domains? What are we looking at in there? So if we look at if we unpack those orange rings in the middle, we start to see where some of these specific DevOps technical practices and tools start to shine through. So if you kind of read over on the right, you'll probably see a lot of terminology that you're familiar with in a DevOps context. You've got unit testing and component testing, test automation. We even have flow metrics and security, application security testing, both static and dynamic, and intrusion detection on the security front. Things like trunk-based development and gated commits. A lot of these things we already talk about in the framework and in the DevOps course. Some of these are new to the IP set, but they're all talked about within a DevOps context, so they're all very important. These practice domains are a way to compartmentalize or contain those technical practices and tools so that we can kind of keep sense of them and make sure that they're in the right buckets. Infrastructure is code, security is code, compliance is code, the everything is code concept. They're tucked into our configuration management domain and an infrastructure management domain that speaks about site reliability engineering, chaos engineering, the idea of selective releases and immutable infrastructure, and cloud concepts like auto scaling. So we needed a place to organize and categorize each of those technical practices and sets of tools. So this is our organizing framework. Those are a few practice domains. Here are a few of the others. There are 11 in total. The ones on the previous slide are more technical, right? More probably naturally associated with DevOps. The ones on this slide may be a little bit less obvious. Things like agile planning and design. Well, why do we talk about agile planning and design within a DevOps context? Well, it's because concepts like lean user experience and small batches and minimum marketable features and minimum viable products and shrinking the portfolio or managing the portfolio in a different way so that we're committing to smaller batches are very important. The way we manage our backlogs is very important because the things that we do upstream can very, very often determine successful delivery and successful DevOps downstream. So we need the people upstream in the value stream to be thinking about continuous delivery and be thinking about speed and building quality in and enabling the technical teams for delivery success as they're doing the planning. So that's why agile planning and design is a very, very important part of the DevOps model. Then we've got the deployment pipeline itself. So this is really what we call the CI/CD pipeline. So when we talk about continuous delivery and continuous integration, the part of the pipeline that we automate from end to end, it's really this deployment pipeline step. A lot of times in the past, you may have heard us mention that we want to automate the continuous delivery pipeline. And that's true. We want to automate as much as possible, but there are activities in that continuous delivery pipeline that probably can't be automated, like hypothesize. How do we automate the generation of a hypothesis? How do we automate collaboration and research up there in continuous exploration? How do we automate the learning process over in release on demand? So the continuous delivery pipeline itself, with its 4 aspects and 16 activities, is a mix of manual processes and automatable processes. So the guidance there is to automate where you can automate, but it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to automate the entire continuous delivery pipeline. But with a deployment pipeline, it's a different story. You can automate the heck out of that thing from end to end, and a lot of customers do. So we kind of finish with concepts like continuous monitoring and even agile product management. This is where we make sure that we have the optics into the business results and the outcomes that we need, because we're doing DevOps for a reason. We're not just delivering for delivery's sake. We're not just deploying for deployment's sake. We're doing all of this so that we can deliver tangible business value and deliver economic outcomes on the business side. So we need people who are in tune with that, right? People who can help inform us of the right metrics, the right leading indicators to go after, the right telemetry to build into our applications, so that when we deploy those, we can measure them and we can know whether we delivered value or not. That's where agile product management really comes in handy and ties this whole DevOps model and organizing framework back into the agile product delivery competency. And then, of course, metrics. Metrics are all over the place, but we have a special place for what we call value metrics, which are the business-oriented metrics that we need to bring into the system so that we're connected to value throughout the entire cycle. Okay, so a lot there to cover, right? So we've just taken the first step in defining these practice domains, and over time, we're going to be building out specific guidance and examples for each of these concepts. So going back to the diagram itself, it may be helpful to know a little bit about how this works or how we expect it to be applied. The core message here is that DevOps enables the continuous delivery pipeline, right? Well, how does that happen with all of these layers and rings and all of this complexity and all of these words and lines on the graphic? Well, it's actually pretty simple. So imagine we're at a step in the delivery pipeline. Let's say that we're here in the develop part of the continuous delivery pipeline. And we want to make sure that we are developing in a way that contributes to continuous delivery. We want to be helping the system, not hurting the system, right? So we need to think about the things that we need to do within that activity that will support and enable continuous delivery. Well, when we're doing those things, we have to not only be thinking about how we're going to be writing the software, what programming languages we're using and where we're putting the curly braces, and how we're organizing the code, whether it's object oriented or procedural or some other way. We need to be thinking about how we're building quality in, right? Are we writing tests first? And what do those tests look like? How many tests are we running? And do we have the code coverage we want with those tests? Are we building security in? Where are we possibly introducing security vulnerabilities into our code? And do we know it? Are we aware of that? Are we closing those vulnerabilities at the time we're doing the development? We need to be thinking about those things, right? So that brings continuous security into play, continuous quality into play. So we need to think about how we're building quality and security in. We also need to be thinking about how we're managing version control here, right? So as we're developing, where's our code going? Where is it being stored? And where are our branches? How are we merging back? How long-lived are our branches? Are we using trunk-based development, or are we doing some other pattern? But how are we getting our code from the desktop back into the repository? And are we as a team managing the continual deployability and the quality and the integrity of that code base? We need to be thinking about that, right? We also need to be thinking about configuration management here, because when we think about doing things as code, we're developing those things as code. So infrastructure as code is a great example, right? If we're employing infrastructure as code concepts, that means that we are scripting out our infrastructure builds and we are storing them somewhere. That is a develop step. That's a coding step. So we need to think about what artifacts, what scripts, what file types we're creating and managing, and where those are being stored. So that all comes into play here too. And we need to be thinking about how all of this relates to where we are in that deployment pipeline. Are we pre-commit? Are we post-commit? Are we doing development on? Are we doing development in a way that is building quality in, so that when we commit that code, it's going to invoke the deployment pipeline, and that code is going to go through all of the steps or all of the stages of that continuous delivery pipeline cleanly? Or are we skipping steps, which is going to cause problems with the deployment pipeline? So these are all things that we need to be thinking about. And value stream over here just kind of makes us aware that there are certain metrics that we need to be thinking about here too. We need to be building application telemetry in at this step. So we need to know what those metrics are that are important to the business to capture, whether it's adoption metrics or usage metrics or page metrics, page load times, or click-throughs, whatever it is. We need to be thinking about all of those things as we're doing that develop step. So what this model does is helps us understand the practices and the knowledge that we need to be pulling in to each of these steps so that we can enable fast flow this way. Another way to think of this is, with all of the talk we do about shifting left, we know that we're shifting left a lot of concepts, but what are these concepts? This helps us understand which concepts are shifting left and which of those technical practices we need to build into these activities as we go. So that's really the model. And we take it step by step through the 16 activities of the continuous delivery pipeline, drawing in these DevOps technical practices and the tooling that help us go fast through the continuous delivery pipeline. Okay, and I mentioned this, Calmer is still core to the whole model, and that's why we have it there right in the center. We've sort of replaced Calmer as the landing page for DevOps, but now it's still a very, very important part of the thinking. So we still have that model. We've altered this a little bit. There used to be a big red dot there in the middle. We've taken away the big red dot. So we no longer label this explicitly, safe DevOps or the Calmer approach to DevOps. We still have the 5 areas of concern around here. And one big change that we made was an adjustment to how we describe measurement. Before this 5.1 set, this said measure everything, and that was causing some consternation. It's easy to say measure everything, but it's very, very difficult to do it. And then, you can argue whether it really makes sense to measure everything, because isn't that a lot of data, and isn't managing a lot of data very expensive? So we backed away from that and provided more explicit guidance on what we should be measuring. We should really be measuring flow and quality and value. So now the measurement part of the Calmer article has been rewritten away from measuring everything and focusing on telemetry to calling out the specific metric, flow metrics and quality metrics and value metrics that we should be thinking about in measurement. Okay, so Calmer is still a very, very important part of the model, and that article has been adjusted to comply with our latest thinking. Great. So that brings us back to the core model. All of these pieces and parts working together, the continuous delivery pipeline, the practice domains, calmer as a mindset, and all of this working throughout the entire continuous delivery pipeline. Everybody in the value stream on board with the thinking here, thinking in small batches, how we can build quality in, how we can run these experiments very, very quickly so that we can produce business value, and everybody is customer centric at all times. Pieces of the model working together so that we can deliver value always. We want to always be delivering value. Value is just flying out of these software factories at all times. That's sort of the end state that we want to get to. Continuous delivery pipelines with all of the people involved in the value stream, working hard in a shared mindset so that value is just spraying out of these software factories like it never has been before. Okay, so that's our thinking there, and that's really the DevOps part of 5.1. There are some other cool updates in there that you might want to know about. I'll run through these pretty quickly. The first is value streams. So we have clearer guidance on development value streams versus operational value streams. And as an architect, especially an enterprise architect, if there are any enterprise architects or maybe solution architects out there in the audience, you may be interested in looking at these articles. So we define 4 operational value stream types. And so if you're doing work as an enterprise architect, for example, it might be helpful to know how the technical strategy is connecting to the business strategy through these operational value streams. So it would be helpful to know whether your business is running a fulfillment operational value stream or manufacturing value stream, software product value stream, or a supporting operational value stream. It's good as an architect at this level to know how your development value streams are connecting in with your operational value streams. That will help keep the business strategy and the technology strategy tightly linked together. Also, some patterns here for development value streams and how to support those operational value streams. Lots of new guidance there if you'd like to check out the articles. Also, at the portfolio level, we've emphasized participatory budgeting and the fact that what comes out of these value streams is digitally enabled solutions. So again, if you're an architect at this level, at the portfolio level, and you spend a lot of time around these kinds of people, around lean portfolio management, and if you're closely connected with the business, you might want to check these out because you might become involved, or you might be involved already in the budgeting process or in defining the development value streams or helping to optimize and enable them. So here we just have a quick picture of what the participatory budget event looks like, right? There's a lot of information here, read the article, but what I wanted to point out was who's involved? Well, a lot of times system and solution architects are involved and enterprise architects. So think about getting involved in that step. And the more we can have architects involved in the budgeting process, the easier it may be to develop the digitally enabled solutions that our customers really need. So have a seat at the table. We need to be thinking about not only the business ask, but the technical ask at the budgeting table. Also, we've introduced team topologies as an organizing framework for teams. So we have that article there, and you might want to check that out because there are some insights into how teams should be formed, and that informs how teams operate. It also informs the architecture of the solutions that those teams typically are responsible for. So streamlined teams may have different architectures than complicated subsystem teams. Platform teams may have more, interface-based, loosely coupled, highly reusable, highly pluggable architectures, and enabling teams might be teams like system teams or runway teams that are putting down architectural runway on behalf of the arts. So this is just another view of how agile teams can be formed, and this is based on the kinds of solutions that they provide, and of course those solutions need to be architected. So that may be one area that you can get into to help your arts define the right architecture for the team type. We also have a new business and technology landing page. So that's an adjustment to the lower left-hand corner of the big picture, where we used to have different areas of the business called out. We had business and dev and ops and security. So now this has just been lumped into business and technology. So we have guidance around business teams and technology teams. Well, we're not so much concerned in this call about the business teams, but there are technology teams there as well. So you might want to give that a read. So there are some very interesting insights that connect what's going on with software to what's going on in hardware, and how the trends in software delivery and agile team formation are driving a need for agile in the hardware space too. So if there are any hardware architects or hardware engineers in the audience, you might want to go check out that article. There's some really interesting insights there. Okay, really quick mention of things that are in the pipeline. This slide is just a reminder that we're developing a lot of new things in Scaled Agile, and it's not just courseware anymore. It's not just about courseware and toolkits and articles. We're driving more engagement through the community platform. We're putting more insights into our toolkits. We're driving more useful information and assets, instructional videos, e-learning, examples, tools into our community platform too. So there's more of an ecosystem of products that we're thinking about in all of these domains. We're thinking about this kind of a diverse product set within the DevOps and architecture realms too. So on the DevOps front, we're currently making changes to the DevOps course. We're bringing that up to speed with this 5.1 knowledge set, and we're also remote enabling it. So the DevOps course has been a little bit late to the virtual classroom space and remote delivery enablement, like a lot of the other courses. Well, we're fixing that right now. So within the next 6 to 8 weeks, look forward to that being released. We've also made improvements to the DevOps Health Radar, and this is live today. So I encourage everybody to go to the metrics page of the Scaled Agile framework and download the latest DevOps Health Radar assessment. We've made it much more usable, much more friendly, much more intuitive to use. And also in the pipeline are some thinking that we're doing around examples. We've learned a lot over the past year and a half as we've deep dived into DevSecOps and experimented with technical training with DevSecOps. We're taking those learnings back, and we're still thinking about whether it makes sense for us to deliver a technical course. But in the meantime, we have a lot of knowledge and examples and tools that we could be releasing through the community platform. And of course, Safe Collaborate and the Safe Community Platform would be the vehicles for delivering a lot of these new things. On the architecture and engineering front, we have a member of the framework team, Harry Kahneman, who is spearheading the Safe for Hardware team's workshop. So this is something that is in pre-release now. It's going through an either alpha or a beta testing run, but we have this knowledge base that's developing, and this is Safe for Hardware teams. So this is where we're getting more deeply into the hardware realm and the engineering realm with Agile guidance. We also have various articles out there in the framework that need to be split. This one is a great example. The System and Solution Architect and Engineering article is sort of 4 articles in one. Well, we're going to start to split these out and give each portion of these articles a little bit more treatment. So look forward to that split coming soon. Also, in the large solution level of Safe, we're playing around with this industrial DevOps idea. This is how do we do DevOps and continuous delivery at the solution level. So for big enterprises that do cyber physical systems, mix of hardware and software, there's a lot of manufacturing involved, maybe solution trains. How do we do continuous delivery in that kind of a setting? That's what industrial DevOps is, and we're building some IP around that. We're also going to be making an update to the Safe for Architects course, bringing that into 5.1 compliance as well. So that should be coming down the pike. All right, and then maybe someday a big picture 5.2. We don't know. We're already starting to talk about what that might look like, but really no plans as yet. We're still we're letting 5.1 marinate in the community now, but we are starting to think about what is on the horizon. Okay, so that's all I have for you today. Hopefully we still have some time for Q&A. How are we on time, Fredrik?
Yeah, we have a couple of minutes, so thank you very much for this update. And there's a lot of things to take in here, I guess. And for me, it looks like, as you were pointing out, there's good clarifications and deepening of things that might have just been just briefly discussed earlier. So this is great stuff, at least for me. But yeah, is there anyone in the call who wants to ask a question? This is time. Let's see. You
see some good feedback in the chat.
Yeah.
There's some thumbs
it's
up.
Also
that was great.
Okay to unmute if you want to, but let's see. Automation.
Hi, I had a quick question. Could you repeat what you said about the ETA for the update of the DevOps course, Mark?
Yes, we're currently working on that. I don't have a date for you.
Yeah, okay.
But we're currently reaching the midpoint of our current PI, and it's a PI objective of ours right now to have that course complete and in market by the end of the PI. So we're probably looking at the April timeframe, so April-ish.
Okay. So spring. I'm noting spring here. Okay. Thanks,
spring,
Mark.
Yes, say spring.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. But as soon as possible, we're working as fast as we can on that course. We need to get it out. Yep. So hopefully sooner rather than later, but don't have an exact date for you yet.
Thank you.
And the architects course, that's afterwards or in the same type of time frame, or?
The architects course will be afterward. The reason we had to fast track DevOps was because there was a lot of DevOps content in the big picture 5.1. So we needed to get that up to speed. And we had delayed remote enablement of DevOps. So it's like, we needed to hit those three in succession, get that up to par with the rest of the courses. The architects course is already remote enabled. So it's already a little bit ahead of DevOps from that respect. So the one thing that we'll have to do with the architects course is bring it into 5.1 compliance. And that's a pretty easy lift. I would expect that to happen, maybe late spring, early summer.
Great, thank you. So Kjell, you have your hand up here.
Yes, I have. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So when I looked at the new pages in DevOps, and I see that you've done quite a lot of work here. I'm looking into like the definition of DevOps, kind of like the first sentence on your landing page. Mm-hmm. And what I'm a little bit missing is something about accountability and responsibility in the kind of like the definition. Like what I'm looking for is like in security that the team is responsible for the security of the artifact that we deliver, the service that we deliver. And what's your thoughts about that? Or
yeah, we don't have that accountability directly in the definition of DevOps. That would add a lot more words to the glossary definition, and we try to keep those as concise as possible. But I definitely hear what you're saying, and I would say that where we address that head on is in Calmer, especially the C of Calmer, culture, where we need a culture of collective responsibility for DevOps. So we're all in this together. It's not that if we're information security and we need to make sure that security is baked in, we're not just shifting that left onto the teams, right? And forgetting about it. We're not forcing teams to to memorize 300-page security policy specifications and to know exactly how to implement so that they're not introducing vulnerabilities, right? We need to partner with them. We need to be responsible for that as well. And so as we're shifting the responsibility left, we're also shifting the knowledge left, we're shifting the partnership left, and we're doing more pairing and mobbing and teamwork around making sure that we're building those things in. So it may not be explicit in the definition or in some of the writing now, but it's definitely in there, definitely applied. Maybe I'll go back and think about how we can make that more explicit. It's definitely a big part of the DevOps culture we're trying to cultivate.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for the question. I think Ken has a question here in the chat about team topologies and what courses will sort of bring those up.
Yeah, very interesting. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if team topologies very soon started to make an appearance in some of the courses, like maybe Safe for Teams or Leading Safe. Yep. So I'm going to take that back, and I'm going to let the framework team know that that question came up, and I'll see if I can get an answer. But right now, we don't have any concrete plans. We don't have anything in the backlog, let's say, that's going to introduce team topologies to the course. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen tomorrow, because we put things in and out of the backlog on a daily basis.
And Alan, maybe if you can come unmute and ask your question, I think it might be helpful.
Sure, it might be nitpicky. I was just following a discussion, and I liked listening to Mark, especially as he spoke to some of the automation around the development of the iconography and the thinking, and inferring some conversations with customers, and a focus on the opportunity is largely within the deployment, I believe, quartile as it appears, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And then later there was a different view, maybe it was an evolving view, but I think it was slide 35 when I looked at the emphasis on automation. And it was a minor graphic to the thing, but it was talking to the whole continuous delivery. And I wondered if that was intentional or not.
Let's see if we can go to slide 35.
And granted, I mean, you're more versed in this than I am. I've got an awful lot to read and to take in, but
no problem.
More of an SBC4, so trying to keep up with where things are going.
Yeah, things are moving pretty fast, right? Well, yeah. Thanks for the question. So was it this one? This is slide 35.
I still, oh, there it is. Yes.
Okay, and so, can you ask your question again?
Sure. I was just reading the automation sort of sphere over to the right, and I'm taking it, the focus is on continuous delivery pipeline, which I took to be that entire outer circle as you introduced it.
Yes, you're exactly right.
Whereas a few slides earlier, you were talking and you were sharing that, with customers, and really the opportunity for adding automation is not for everything in that cycle, but more in the deployment quartile, which is what I've experienced myself with clients.
Gotcha.
So I was just curious if that was a legacy mention, or if that's intentional, or am I reading too much into it?
It's a little, so the message there is, over here we're talking about automating the continuous delivery pipeline. We can't automate the entire thing because the entire thing is the entire thing. There are things like this and this that we probably can't automate. Collaborating and research, we need to reach out to customers and have face-to-face empathy interviews, for example, right? And do a lot of Gemba. Can't automate those steps. So over here, the guidance is automate where you can in the continuous delivery pipeline. Now, when I was talking about the things that you can automate and are usually automated from end to end, it's this deployment pipeline. So starting here and ending here, this is our deployment pipeline, which generally equates to what's commonly referred to as the CI/CD pipeline.
Yeah.
This stretch is usually completely automated, or teams strive to completely automate that step from code commit to successfully deployed in production.
Yep. Thank you.
So this is where we see a goal for 100% automation, but then around the continuous delivery pipeline, the guidance is automate where you can to get acceleration.
Okay, so more in spirit at this level, in aggregate, and then certainly
Right.
the opportunity is heaviest right there.
Right, exactly.
Thanks.
You bet. Thanks for the question.
So I think it's good to also mention here, at least in my experience, that going back to the lean flow again and see where do we actually have the bottlenecks? Where do we want to start to automate or even to improve our manual processes? That's, I think, such a core thing in DevOps that sometimes gets sort of missed out.
Right. Don't automate a broken process. Lean out that process first, get it healthy, and then automate for acceleration.
Yep. So let's see, did we have another question? Mikael, did you want to unmute and ask it, or let's see.
Sure, I can try. I'm used to speak Swedish. I listened to Kent Beck, one of my favorites. I love I like XP, and he said he has joined Facebook for a couple of years and learned a lot, and no one is really interested in TDD at Facebook. And my problem is how do we combine speed of innovation with the continuous quality, continuous security, and build it in this pipeline? Is there a shortcut when you want to get the answers in design thinking?
Well, there's a lot to that question. But I always like to start with, so since you mentioned continuous quality in the context of how do we move fast and how do we get this going, and really quick thank you to everybody who has to drop at this point. I can stay on and answer some questions, but if you need to go, please feel free to go. But thank you very much for your time today. I'll continue to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Mark, for staying on.
You bet. Yeah, I'd rather play hooky from all of my other responsibilities to stay and talk DevOps with you guys. So when we're talking about continuous quality and building it in, getting it going, and accelerating for innovation, I always like to start with what I call the trifecta, which is the test first mindset, TDD, and BDD, and test automation. So really those things working together can really, really greatly accelerate your pipeline. Just doing those three things, getting the people who are responsible for writing the tests and writing the requirements of the backlog items, and the folks building the software, and then the machines that are doing the testing, all in sync, can really, really accelerate things. That can give you acceleration here in synthesize using BDD, because if the people who are writing the requirements are also writing the tests, that saves a lot of time and saves a lot of indirection, right? Let's write the acceptance criteria in our features as executable tests. And then as we're developing those, take a test first mindset, making sure that we're building quality in, we're thinking about the acceptance criteria, we're thinking about how we're going to test for goodness or badness for these things. And we're not just writing code to write code, but we don't write code unless there's a test for it. So many benefits from that, right? We're going in with a quality mindset. We're reducing tech debt because we're not introducing any code for which there is not a test. And we're aligning directly with the tests written by the people who are writing the requirements per se. And those people are directly connected to the customer. So we have linkage and lineage and traceability back to the customer. We're doing things fast. And then when we're doing the testing here, here, and here, we're automating that as much as possible so that we're speeding through that. And as we get these practices in motion and mature them, we're building that test pyramid where most of our testing is done upstream in an automated fashion with unit tests. And we have some integration tests that are, more down here in the test end-to-end part. And then the manual tests that traditionally take a long time to execute are just relegated to, say, some exploratory tests and minor things down the line. So that's my quick answer for at least a part of the solution if we're talking about building continuous quality practices so that we can innovate and accelerate.
Okay. I have a problem if you want to test a lot of ideas before you say that's the solution. Then you have to open up for don't waste time for building tests and it costs a lot to do that quality security job if you're not going to use it.
It doesn't, and it's a little bit of the paradox, but that's a conversation that comes up very, very often, because now if you're a developer, you're not just developing, you're writing tests. Yeah. So now I've got a double job, right? It takes more time for me to write my code because I'm writing the test first, and I'm executing the test, I'm making sure that it fails, and then I'm writing the code, then I'm running the test again. It's all of this. It's all of this extra effort, right? So yes, we are, as we're doing this, we are shifting a lot of effort left, and that's more time and more money. But where we get the savings is down here. We're addressing the issues as they come up. We're finding the defects fast, and we're squashing the bugs up here where it's far less expensive and it's very, very fast to fix those bugs. Whereas if we're waiting out here, the costs are very, very high, and the time to find them and the time to fix them is very, very high. So really where we get the acceleration, where we get the time savings is out here. And a lot of times that's conversation, because what people see is more time invested up here. And a lot of people see that as, well, we're delaying delivery because we're doing so much up front. Yeah. It's a conversation. It's part of the cultural shift that needs to happen. But the more you do it, the more you'll see that you're building quality in, and that's producing less of a need to fix things after they go to production or fix things later, which gets very, very expensive and very time consuming.
I agree with the last comment here in the chat that TDD is a mindset and is a never waste. But also adding to that, I mean, they're all looking at this agile product management and design thinking and those type of things of rapidly prototyping stuff. But in that case, we're hardly never going to use that in production. It's more maybe even mock-ups that you present to the customers and try to iterate fast, even before you go to any code. So that's, I think there are different aspects of this, of course, too, when we talk about doing it. Yeah,
it's a cultural shift. It's not easy. But what I've seen is that once teams get into the mode, they start to see the benefits of it really fast, and it just becomes part of the culture. It may take a few months for it to sink in, but it's well worth the effort.
Yeah, teams that really learn TDD, they get fast at it, as you say, and then you don't really think about it in that way. So at first, it will feel like a time sink. I guess most people feel that, at least.
Yeah, but as we say in Agile, if it hurts, do it more.
Yep.
Because you're probably on the right path.
All right, do we have time for last question from Michelle here? Let's see. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I just need to unmute first. I have a comment here. I think that by investing in automation continuously ascertain that the quality and security is in place, we lower the transaction costs, which means that we can actually afford on testing more things on the market to the customers. And I think that sometimes it's very counterintuitive what actually works with the customer. You really need to do like A/B testings or green-red testing to really know what works on the customer level. And this lowering of the transaction cost is an enabler for that innovation that you can have in that part of the system. Yeah.
Exactly. Your holding costs may go up a little bit because you're shifting a lot of this left, but yeah, your transaction costs are going to go down.
Exactly.
Potentially way down. Yeah, love that perspective. Yeah.
All right, good. Thank you everyone for coming and also staying this late. And thank you, Mark, for coming and presenting all this great stuff. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me. This is great. I can't wait till next time.
Yep, we'll make sure to invite you and we'll have some other subjects in our after work sessions as well. Good night, everyone, and good day. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
So
Thank
long.
you.